"This wedding is a fraud!" My sister screamed into the microphone, her voice echoing off the high vaulted ceilings of the Onyx Hall. "You are marrying a broke waiter, Jasmine. This is pathetic." I stood frozen at the altar, my hands trembling around my bouquet of lilies. My sister Dominique stood center stage in a white lace gown that looked suspiciously like a wedding dress, with her husband Hunter smirking beside her. The 300 guests gasped, cell phones raised to capture my humiliation. Hunter stepped forward, adjusting his expensive silk tie. "We checked his background, Jasmine. Your husband does not even have a bank account. He is using you." My mother sat in the front row and did not say a word to defend me. I felt tears burning my eyes, ready to run, ready to disappear. But then my fiancé Elijah squeezed my hand. He did not look angry. He looked amused. He leaned in close to my ear, his voice calm and steady. "Should we tell them who I really am, or should we let them dig their grave a little deeper?" I looked at the smug faces of my family, the people who had tormented me for years, and I made my choice. My name is Jasmine, and at 30 years old, I thought I had finally escaped the shadow of my family. I work as an archival book restorer, a quiet job that requires patience and precision. Two things my family knows nothing about. To them, I am just the slow, unsuccessful daughter. My sister Dominique is the star, the one who married a white investment banker named Hunter and lives in a house she cannot afford. If you have ever been the black sheep of your family, hit that subscribe button. You are going to want to see how this ends. Because what my family did not know was that the man standing next to me in the flower-stained t-shirt was not a waiter. He was the owner of the very ground they were standing on. The nightmare truly began 3 months ago at Le Jardin, the most pretentious French restaurant in the city. It was supposed to be an engagement dinner to introduce Elijah to my family. I arrived early, my stomach in knots. The restaurant was a palace of crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths, the kind of place where the waiters judge your shoes. Dominique and Hunter were already seated at the best table by the window. Dominique was busy taking selfies, making sure her 2-carat diamond ring caught the light. Hunter was loudly complaining about the valet service. When I sat down, Dominique did not even look up from her phone. "You are late, Jasmine?" she said. "And is that the dress you wore to Cousin Tasha's baby shower last year?" I smoothed down my skirt, trying to keep my voice steady. "It is vintage silk, Dominique. I restored it myself." Hunter laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Vintage is just a nice word for used, Jasmine. But hey, at least you are consistent. Where is this mystery fiancé of yours?" "Probably parking my car. I hope he does not scratch the rims." Just then, Elijah walked in. My heart sank just a little. He had come straight from the community center where he volunteered every weekend teaching baking classes to at-risk youth. He was wearing faded jeans, worn-out sneakers, and a gray t-shirt, with a smear of white flour on the shoulder. In a room full of suits and evening gowns, he stuck out like a sore thumb, but he walked with a confidence that made heads turn. "Sorry I am late," Elijah said, his voice deep and warm, as he kissed my cheek. The traffic on the bridge was a mess. He reached out to shake Hunter's hand. "Nice to meet you. I am Elijah." Hunter did not stand up. He did not even take his hand out of his pocket. He just looked Elijah up and down, staring at the flower on his shirt with a look of absolute disgust. "Oh, I get it," Hunter said, snapping his fingers at a passing server. "You must be fresh off a shift. Hey, big guy. Since you are already standing, grab me a sparkling water with lime, and tell the kitchen to hurry up with the bread basket." My mouth fell open. Hunter thought my fiancé was a waiter. No worse. He thought he was the help. "Hunter," I said, my voice rising. "This is Elijah, my fiancé. He does not work here." Dominique giggled, covering her mouth with her manicured hand. "Oh my God, that is hilarious. But honestly, Jasmine, can you blame him? Look at him. He looks like he just came from the back alley. Elijah, sweetie, next time you come to a place with 3 Michelin stars, maybe try to find a shirt without food on it. It is embarrassing for us." Elijah did not flinch. He slowly pulled out the chair next to me and sat down. He wiped the flour off his shoulder calmly. I was baking for the shelter downtown, he said, his eyes locked on Hunter. But I will remember the water for next time. Hunter just scoffed and turned back to the menu. Whatever. Just try not to touch anything expensive. The dinner was 2 hours of torture. Hunter bragged non-stop about his job as a vice president at a hedge fund, throwing around financial terms he barely understood. He talked about his golf trips, his new Tesla, and how much he hated lazy people who expect handouts. Every time Elijah tried to speak, Dominique would cut him off. "So, Elijah," she asked, twirling her wine glass. "Jasmine says you are in food service. What is that, McDonald's? Taco Bell? Do you get free nuggets?" "I work in supply chain logistics," Elijah said quietly. It was technically true. He owned the largest food logistics company on the East Coast, but he never felt the need to brag. Hunter rolled his eyes. "Logistics. That means he drives a delivery truck, babe. Just say you are a driver, man. No shame in blue-collar work. Someone has to deliver my Amazon packages." Then came the bill. Dominique had ordered the most expensive items on the menu: caviar lobster and 2 bottles of a 1996 Bordeaux that cost $2,000 each. When the waiter brought the silver tray, Hunter whistled. $4,200. Steep. He spun the tray across the table until it stopped in front of me. "Your treat," Jasmine, Hunter said with a cruel smile. "Since you invited us to meet your guy. It is only fair." My blood ran cold. Hunter knew I made $40,000 a year restoring books. He knew I was saving every penny for a house. I looked at the bill, my hands shaking. "Dominique," I whispered, "I cannot afford this. You ordered the wine." My mother, Mama Joyce, who had been silently eating her lobster, finally spoke up. "Jasmine, do not be rude. Hunter and Dominique are guests. Hunter is used to a certain lifestyle. You cannot expect him to drink cheap wine. You wanted to play grown-up and host a dinner, so pay the bill. Stop embarrassing the family." I felt tears pricking my eyes. I looked at Elijah, ashamed that he had to see this. I opened my purse, knowing my debit card would be declined. Hunter leaned back, enjoying the show. "Look, if you are broke, just say so," he sneered. "I can cover it. I do not want us to have to wash dishes in the back, although your boyfriend is probably used to that." Elijah placed his hand over mine, stopping me from taking out my wallet. He reached into his jeans pocket and pulled out a thin, matte black metal card. It had no numbers on it, just a small gold chip. He placed it on the tray without a word. Hunter laughed out loud. "What is that?" "A library card. A gift card to Home Depot. Man, put that away before you get arrested." The waiter walked over, looking annoyed. But when he looked down at the black card, his face went pale. His arrogance vanished instantly. He looked at Elijah with wide, terrified eyes. He recognized the card. It was an invite-only card for ultra-high net worth individuals. "Sir," the waiter stammered, bowing slightly. "I apologize. I did not realize. I will process this immediately." Elijah just held up a finger to his lips, a silent command for the waiter to be quiet. The waiter nodded nervously and rushed away. Hunter looked confused for a second, but then his ego took over. He laughed nervously. "Must be a glitch in their system if they accepted that piece of plastic. Or maybe they just felt sorry for you." 10 minutes later, the waiter returned with the receipt, bowing to the table. "Everything is taken care of. Thank you for your patronage." Hunter immediately snatched the receipt. "See?" He puffed out his chest. "They probably saw my face. I am a VIP here. They comped the meal because they know who I am." He looked at Elijah with pity. "Put your toy card away, big guy. Maybe one day you will have the influence to get a free meal, but do not count on it." Dominique pulled out her phone and started live streaming. "Hey guys, just finished dinner at Le Jardin. My husband Hunter is such a boss. The restaurant literally paid for our dinner just to have us here." Meanwhile, Jasmine's boyfriend tried to pay with a library card. So cringe. Can you believe my sister is marrying a broke loser? I stood up, shaking with rage, but Elijah pulled me close. His voice was low and dangerous, but his face was calm. Let them talk, Jasmine, he whispered, as we walked out into the cool night air. The higher they climb, the harder they fall. And trust me, baby, the fall is going to be spectacular. I did not know it then, but Elijah had already started the clock on their destruction. And the wedding was going to be the main event. The silence in my mother's living room was heavy enough to crush bone. I sat on the floral love seat, clutching a velvet folder to my chest, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Across from me, my sister Dominique sat with her legs crossed, inspecting her cuticles, as if the world revolved around her manicure. My mother, Mama Joyce, paced back and forth on the plush carpet, the ice in her glass of sweet tea clinking with every angry step. I had just dropped a bomb that shattered the fragile peace of our Sunday afternoon, and I could feel the shockwaves still vibrating in the air. I booked the Onyx Hall, I said again, my voice trembling slightly, but my resolve firm. For October 15th, Elijah and I put the deposit down this morning. Dominique's head snapped up so fast I heard her neck crack. Her eyes, usually narrowed in judgment, went wide with disbelief. The Onyx Hall, she repeated, her voice rising an octave. The historic ballroom downtown, the one with the crystal ceiling and the 5-year waiting list. That Onyx Hall. Yes, I replied, allowing a small, satisfied smile to touch my lips. There was a last-minute cancellation. Elijah knew someone who knew the management. We got lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it, of course. Elijah owned the building, but they did not need to know that yet. To them, he was still just a blue-collar worker who got a lucky break. I watched Dominique's face turn a shade of red that clashed horribly with her designer dress. I knew exactly what she was thinking. 5 years ago, when she married Hunter, she had begged and pleaded to get into the Onyx. She wanted the prestige, the glamour, the photos that would make her high school rivals jealous. But Hunter, for all his bragging about money, could not afford the rental fee, and they certainly did not have the connections to bypass the waitlist. She ended up getting married at a muddy golf course in the suburbs, where the reception tent leaked during a thunderstorm. She had spent the last 5 years pretending it was a rustic chic choice, but I knew it ate her alive. Dominique let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. You cannot be serious. You and the waiter are going to get married in the city's most exclusive venue. Who is paying for this, Jasmine? Did you take out a loan? Did you steal from your little book repair fund? Hunter says those places charge $50,000 just to open the doors. We have savings, Dominique. I lied smoothly. And we are keeping the guest list intimate. Dominique stood up, smoothing her skirt with aggressive swipes of her hands. She walked over to the window, staring out at the driveway where my Honda Civic was parked next to her leased Mercedes. She was calculating, plotting. I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head. She spun around, her face transformed into a mask of fake concern. October 15th, she said slowly, tapping a finger against her chin. Oh, Jasmine. Honey. You cannot get married on October 15th. Why not? I asked, bracing myself. Because of the retrograde, she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Mercury is in retrograde that week, and the moon is waning. It is terrible feng shui. If you get married on that day, your marriage is doomed to fail. I read an article about it just yesterday. It brings poverty and infidelity. I stared at her. You have got to be kidding me. You do not even believe in astrology. I believe in protecting my little sister, she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Look, I am doing you a favor. You need to cancel that date. Move it to, say, next spring. Do it at the community park near the lake. It is much more your speed. It is casual, relaxed. You can have food trucks. Elijah would feel so much more comfortable there, do not you think? He would not have to worry about using the wrong fork. I gripped the velvet folder tighter. I am not moving the date, Dominique. And I am certainly not getting married in a park. Mama Joyce stopped pacing. She set her glass down on the coaster with a sharp thud. Listen to your sister Jasmine. She knows about these things. She moves in high society circles. She knows what is appropriate. This isn't about astrology, is it? I challenged, looking directly at Dominique. You just cannot stand the fact that I got the venue you wanted. Dominique's face hardened. The mask of concern dropped, revealing the ugly jealousy underneath. You think you are better than me, she spat, just because you scraped together a deposit for a fancy room. But let's be real, Jasmine. It is a waste. A total waste. You are marrying a nobody. Putting a waiter in a tuxedo does not make him a prince. It makes him a servant playing dress-up. And then she smiled. A slow, predatory smile that made my stomach turn. Actually, she said, turning to Mom, this works out perfectly. Hunter and I have been talking. We have been going through a rough patch lately. His work is stressful and we have grown distant. We need something to bring us back together. We were thinking of doing a vow renewal ceremony, a recommitment to our love. She took a step toward me. And October 15th is our 5.5-year anniversary. Roughly, it is a sign. No, I whispered, shaking my head. Mom clapped her hands together, her eyes lighting up. Oh, Dominique, that is a beautiful idea. A vow renewal. That is exactly what you two need to solidify your status. Hunter has been working so hard for that partnership. A big, elegant event at the Onyx Hall would show his bosses that he is a family man with stability and class. Exactly, Dominique said, nodding enthusiastically. We can invite his partners, the investors. It would be a networking goldmine. She turned to me, her hand held out expectantly. So here is the plan, Jasmine. You are going to transfer the booking to my name. Hunter will reimburse you for the deposit, obviously. We are not charity cases. You can take that money and put it towards something sensible, like a down payment on a trailer, or a nice backyard barbecue wedding. I stood up, my legs shaking but holding me upright. I am not giving you my venue, Dominique. This is my wedding. Mama Joyce stepped between us, her face twisting into a scowl. Do not be selfish, Jasmine. Look at the bigger picture. Your sister's marriage is the foundation of this family's reputation. Hunter supports us. He helps with the bills. If this party helps him get that promotion, we all win. You and Elijah, well, let's be honest. Does it really matter where you say your vows? You could do it at the courthouse and it would be the same. Elijah probably cannot even afford a tuxedo. Why embarrass him by dragging him into a ballroom where he does not belong? He belongs wherever I am, I said, my voice rising. And I deserve this, Mom. For once in my life I want something beautiful. I am keeping the date. Dominique's eyes narrowed into slits. You are really going to say no to me? After everything I have done for you, I let you live in my old room when you graduated. I gave you my old clothes. You sold me your old clothes, Dominique, I corrected her. And you charged me interest. Dominique screamed a primal sound of frustration. She grabbed a throw pillow and hurled it across the room, but it wasn't enough to satisfy her rage. She needed to hurt me. She needed to destroy something I loved. Her eyes darted around the room and landed on the coffee table in front of me. Sitting there next to her half-finished cup of steaming hazelnut latte was my portfolio. It was a collection of before and after photos of the 17th century manuscripts I had restored over the last year. It was my pride and joy, the proof of my skill, the only thing that validated my career to the outside world. I had brought it to show Mom my latest project, a rare Bible worth $50,000 that I had brought back from the brink of decay. Dominique lunged. I saw it happen in slow motion. Her hand snatched the ceramic mug. Her wrist flicked with practiced malice. No, I screamed, diving forward, but I was too late. The dark hot liquid arced through the air and splashed directly onto the open portfolio. I watched in horror as the brown stains soaked instantly into the heavy cream paper. It pooled over the photographs, warping the edges, obliterating the intricate details of my work. The smell of artificial hazelnut filled the air, sickeningly sweet. Oops, Dominique said, her voice flat and devoid of any apology. Clumsy me. I fell to my knees, frantically trying to shake the liquid off, dabbing at the ruined pages with the hem of my shirt. Months of documentation, irreplaceable records of my craftsmanship, ruined in a second of petty spite. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely breathe. Tears, hot and angry, blurred my vision. I looked up at her. She was standing over me, smirking. Mom was just standing there, sipping her tea, looking away as if she saw nothing. "You did that on purpose," I whispered, my voice choking with a sob. "Maybe if you were not so clumsy with your choices, accidents would not happen." Dominique shrugged. "Look at it this way, Jasmine. Now you do not have to worry about your little scrapbook. You can focus on what is important, transferring that venue to me." She leaned down, her face inches from mine. Her perfume was overpowering, expensive, and cold. "Listen to me, little sister. You are playing a game you cannot win. You think booking a fancy room makes you one of us. It does not. You are pathetic. You are a joke. And if you do not call the Onyx tomorrow morning and change that name on the reservation, I will make your life a living hell. I will tell everyone about that little incident in college. I will tell Elijah lies that will make him run so fast he leaves skid marks." She straightened up and stepped over my ruined portfolio as if it were trash. "We need that venue, Jasmine. Do the right thing, or you will not have a family to invite to your little park wedding anyway." I stayed on the floor, listening to the click of her heels fading down the hallway. I looked at the ruined pages, the brown stains spreading like a disease. I wiped my tears. I did not feel sad anymore. I felt something else, something cold and hard settling in my chest. They wanted a war. They wanted to take the one thing I had built for myself. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over Elijah's contact name. I wasn't going to tell him to cancel. I was going to tell him to double the budget. I stood up, leaving the ruined portfolio on the floor as a monument to their cruelty. I walked to the door, not saying a word to my mother, who was now pretending to read a magazine. "You will regret this," Dominique shouted from the top of the stairs as I opened the front door. I walked out into the cool evening air. "No, Dominique," I whispered to myself as I got into my car. "You are the one who is going to regret this. You just declared war on the owner of the battlefield, and you do not even know it yet." The elevator ride to the 45th floor of the Sterling Financial Tower was silent and suffocating. My ears popped as we ascended, a physical reminder of how far out of our element we were supposed to feel. Elijah stood next to me, wearing a simple navy polo shirt and chinos, looking completely relaxed. I, on the other hand, was gripping the strap of my purse so hard my knuckles were white. Hunter had summoned us here in the middle of a workday. He said it was an emergency family matter, but looking at the polished steel doors and the security cameras watching our every move, it felt more like a sentencing hearing. When the doors opened, we were greeted by a receptionist who looked like she had stepped out of a fashion magazine. She barely glanced at us before pointing toward the double glass doors at the end of the hall. "He is expecting you," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. "Go right in." Hunter's office was designed to intimidate. 3 walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the city skyline, a visual metaphor for how he saw himself above everyone else. Hunter was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, his feet propped up on the polished wood, ankles crossed. He was talking loudly into a headset, laughing at something the person on the other end had said. He saw us walk in but did not move his feet. He just held up a finger, signaling us to wait. We stood there for 5 full minutes while he discussed golf handicaps and stock options. It was a power play, plain and simple. He wanted us to know that our time was worthless compared to his. Finally, he tapped the headset and tossed it onto the desk. "Well, look who finally made it," Hunter said, swinging his legs down and leaning forward. "The happy couple. Or should I say the delusionally happy couple?" I straightened my spine. "What do you want, Hunter? I have work to do." Hunter chuckled, shaking his head. "Restoring old dusty books is hardly work, Jasmine. It is a hobby. Real work happens in places like this." He gestured grandly around the room. "But that is actually why I called you here. I have been thinking a lot about our conversation at Mom's house, about the wedding, about the venue. He opened a leather folder on his desk and slid a piece of paper toward us. It was an employment contract. I know things are tight for you too. Hunter continued, his tone dripping with fake sympathy. Dominique tells me Elijah here is practically unemployed. Volunteering at a soup kitchen is noble, sure, but it does not pay the rent, and it certainly does not pay for the Onyx Hall. So I decided to step up. I am a generous guy after all. I looked down at the paper. It was a contract for a night security guard position at this very building. I pulled some strings with the building management, Hunter said, puffing out his chest. It is a graveyard shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Mostly checking badges and making sure the janitors do not steal anything. But here is the kicker. He paused for dramatic effect. It pays $18 an hour. He looked at Elijah, expecting gratitude. That is almost double minimum wage, big guy. A real career path. You stick with it for 10 years, maybe you make shift supervisor. It is a golden ticket for a guy with your background. Elijah did not blink. He looked at the contract, his face unreadable. You want me to work security here? Elijah asked, his voice calm. Hunter nodded enthusiastically. It is a quid pro quo, Elijah. That is Latin. It means I help you, you help me. See, I get you this job, which creates a stable income for my sister-in-law. In exchange, you two do the responsible thing and transfer the Onyx Hall reservation to Dominique and me. There it was. The trap. Think about it, Jasmine, Hunter said, turning his gaze to me. You cannot afford that wedding. Even if you scrape every penny, you will start your marriage in debt. With this job, Elijah can actually contribute. You give us the venue, we take over the payments, and you get a husband who is gainfully employed. Everyone wins, especially you, since you stop living in fantasy land. My blood boiled. He was not offering a job, he was offering a leash. He wanted to humiliate Elijah, turn him into a servant in his own building, all to steal my wedding date. I opened my mouth to tell him exactly where he could shove his contract, but Elijah stepped forward. Interesting offer, Elijah said. He reached over and picked up a red marker from Hunter's desk. May I? Hunter smirked. Sure. Sign on the dotted line at the bottom. Do not worry about reading the fine print, it is standard legal stuff. Probably too complex for you anyway. Elijah did not sign. Instead, he began to read. He read slowly, his eyes scanning every line. The room was silent save for the hum of the air conditioning. Hunter started to look annoyed. Just sign it, man. I have a lunch meeting in 10 minutes. Elijah uncapped the red marker. Actually, Hunter, there are a few issues here. He drew a sharp red circle around a paragraph on the first page. This clause about overtime is interesting. It states that overtime is calculated bi-weekly, not weekly. That is a violation of state labor laws for hourly contractors. Hunter blinked, confused. What are you talking about? Elijah flipped the page. Slash of red ink. And here. You have listed the uniform deduction as mandatory. Under current legislation, if the uniform is required for the job, the employer cannot deduct the cost if it drops the employee's effective wage below a certain threshold. At $18 an hour, this deduction is borderline illegal. Hunter sat up straighter, his feet dropping to the floor. Hey, stop marking up the paper. That is an official document. Elijah ignored him. He circled a figure on the compensation table. And this pay structure, it seems the security firm is classified as a subsidiary of the parent holding company to avoid payroll taxes. He looked up at Hunter, and for the first time, I saw a flash of the predator behind Elijah's calm eyes. Tell me, Hunter, does your compliance officer know that your vendors are structuring their payroll this way? Because if an audit were to happen, the liability would roll up to the primary leaseholder, which is your firm. Hunter's face went from smug to flushed in 3 seconds. He stood up, slamming his hand on the desk. You listen to me, you ungrateful little punk. I offer you a lifeline, and you try to lecture me on finance. Who do you think you are? You bake bread for homeless people. You do not know the first thing about corporate liability. Elijah capped the red marker with a satisfying click and tossed it onto the desk. It spun and stopped pointing directly at Hunter. I know enough to know when a contract is garbage, Elijah said coolly. And I know enough to know that $18 an hour is an insult. I decline your offer, Hunter, and we are keeping the venue. Hunter's face turned a dangerous shade of purple. He walked around the desk, getting right in Elijah's face. He was shorter than Elijah by 3 inches, but he tried to compensate with aggression. You are making a big mistake, Hunter hissed. You think you are smart. You are nothing. I run this town. I can make sure you never get hired anywhere in this city. You are going to beg me for this job in a month when you are starving. Elijah looked down at him not with fear, but with pity. It was the look a lion gives a yapping chihuahua. I doubt that Elijah said, Come on, Jasmine. The air in here is stale. We turned to leave. As we reached the glass doors, Hunter screamed after us, Get out! And do not think this is over. I am calling your mother Jasmine. I am going to tell her exactly how you threw away this opportunity. You are selfish, both of you. The receptionist stared at us as we walked past, her mouth slightly open. We stepped into the elevator, and as the doors slid shut, cutting off the sound of Hunter's shouting, I leaned against the wall and let out a breath I had been holding for 20 minutes. I looked at Elijah. He was checking his watch, looking as unbothered as if he had just checked the weather. How did you know all that? I asked, staring at him. About the labor laws and the payroll taxes. Elijah smiled a small, secret smile that made my heart flutter. I do a lot of reading, Jasmine. You know that. Besides, bad management is easy to spot if you know where to look. He took my hand, his grip warm and reassuring. Do not worry about him. Hunter is a man building a house on sand. He thinks he is the king of the castle, but he does not realize the tide is coming in. By the time we got to the parking garage, my phone was already blowing up. 12 missed calls from Mama Joyce. A text message from Dominique that just said, You are dead to us. I looked at the notifications and then turned my phone off. Let them call, I said, tossing the phone into the back seat. I am hungry. You want to get lunch? Elijah laughed, starting the car. I know a place. It is not Le Jardin, but the owner treats me a lot better. As we drove out of the underground garage, I looked back at the towering glass skyscraper. Somewhere on the 45th floor, Hunter was probably screaming into his phone, spinning a web of lies to turn my family against me. He thought he had won. He thought he had crushed us. But as I watched Elijah drive calm and confident, I knew the truth. Hunter had just picked a fight with the only man in the city who could buy his entire world and shut it down. And the best part was he didn't even see it coming. The air inside the bridal salon smelled of lavender, expensive champagne, and quiet judgment. This was the kind of place where appointments were made 6 months in advance, and the price tags did not exist, because if you had to ask, you were in the wrong zip code. I had booked this appointment alone, craving just one afternoon of peace, to find the dress I would wear, to marry the man I loved. But peace was a luxury my family refused to let me have. When I arrived, my sister Dominique and my mother Mama Joyce were already sitting on the plush velvet sofa in the private viewing suite. They were sipping the complimentary sparkling wine as if they owned the place. Dominique had invited herself, claiming she needed to be there to provide honest consultation since I had zero fashion sense. My mother had just nodded along, saying that a bride needs her family, even if that family treats her like a charity case. Oh good, you are finally here, Dominique said, not bothering to stand up. Her eyes scanned my outfit, a simple blouse and jeans with open disdain. We were worried you got lost or maybe realized you could not afford to walk through the door. I already told the consultant, a lovely girl named Sarah, not to waste time showing you the premium collection. We need to stick to the clearance rack. Elijah is on a waiter's salary after all. We do not want to break his piggy bank. I greeted Sarah, the consultant, who looked uncomfortable witnessing the family dynamic. I am looking for something timeless, I told her. Silk, maybe crepe. No heavy beading. Dominique snorted into her glass. Timeless. Honey, you need structure. You have broad shoulders and let's be honest, you have put on weight since the engagement. Stress eating, I assume. Sarah, bring her something with sleeves. Long sleeves. And a high neck. We need to cover up as much as possible. She needs a ball gown silhouette to hide those hips. I stood there feeling the familiar heat rising in my cheeks. Dominique had been body shaming me since I was 12, picking apart every curve, every pound, every choice. I prefer a mermaid cut, I said firmly. Dominique laughed a sharp, cruel sound. A mermaid cut. Jasmine, be realistic. You will look like a sausage casing. We are trying to make you look like a bride, not a stuffed animal. Just listen to me. I know what looks good. I was a pageant queen, remember? You were the one in the library. For the next hour, I endured hell. Dominique rejected every dress I pointed at. She forced Sarah to bring in gowns that were hideous heavy things with excessive lace and ruffles that swallowed me whole. When I stepped out of the dressing room in a stiff, high-necked dress that made me itch, Dominique nodded approvingly. See? Much better. It hides your arms. It distracts from your posture. Mom, what do you think? Mama Joyce squinted at me. Well, it is certainly modest. It covers your flaws, Jasmine. You know you do not have your sister's figure. You have always been sturdy. This dress makes you look decent. It is adequate. Adequate. That was the word they used for my entire life. I went back into the changing room to take off the monstrosity. When I came back out in my robe, the viewing room was empty. Sarah looked panicked. Where did they go? I asked. Sarah pointed toward the main showroom floor. Your sister. She saw a dress she liked. I walked out to find Dominique standing in front of a three-way mirror. She was wearing a wedding dress. Not just any wedding dress. It was a Galia Le Havre masterpiece, sheer lace, plunging back intricate embroidery that caught the light like crushed diamonds. It was white, stark bridal white. She was twisting and turning, admiring her reflection while my mother took photos on her phone. Dominique, I said, my voice shaking. What are you doing? Oh, relax, Dominique said, not breaking eye contact with herself in the mirror. I just wanted to see how it fit. Hunter and I are doing the vow renewal at the Onyx Hall, remember? I need something spectacular. Since I'm taking over your venue, I might as well look the part. You are trying on wedding dresses at my bridal appointment? I asked, incredulous. Well, someone has to look good today, she retorted. Besides, look at this. It fits me perfectly. No alterations needed. This is what a bride is supposed to look like, Jasmine. Effortless, slim, radiant. Honestly, I might just buy this today. I could even wear it to your wedding. You know, to elevate the photos. You are going to be in that frumpy clearance dress, so having me in this will give the guests something beautiful to look at. My mother nodded in agreement. It is stunning, Dominique. You look like an angel. Jasmine, you should be happy your sister is so stylish. She can give you tips on how to carry yourself. Something inside me snapped. Not a loud screaming snap, but a quiet, definitive break. I looked at my sister preening in a white gown at my appointment, trying to steal the one moment that was supposed to be mine. I looked at my mother enabling her narcissism, and then I remembered who I was. I was not just Jasmine the doormat. I was a master archivist. I restored million-dollar manuscripts for museums. I knew quality. I knew luxury. And I had my own money, plenty of it sitting in an investment account they knew nothing about. I turned to Sarah. Take that dress off of her, please. It is a sample size and she is stretching the seams. Dominique's jaw dropped. Excuse me. And Sarah, I continued, my voice calm and authoritative. I am done with the clearance rack. Bring me the amsale gown from the window, the silk file trumpet gown with the architectural back. Sarah hesitated. Ma'am, that gown is from the new couture collection. It is $6,000. I know, I said. Bring it. And bring a bottle of the vintage champagne you keep in the back for the VIP clients. Not this sparkling wine. Dominique laughed nervously. Jasmine, stop acting crazy. You cannot afford a $6,000 dress. Elijah will have a heart attack. You are going to bankrupt him before the wedding even starts. I ignored her. I went back into the dressing room. When Sarah helped me into the amsale gown, I felt a shift. The silk was heavy and cool against my skin. The structure was impeccable. It didn't hide my body. It celebrated it. The trumpet flare balanced my shoulders perfectly. I looked like a statue, a work of art. I looked powerful. When I stepped out onto the pedestal, the room went silent. For a split second, I saw genuine shock in Dominique's eyes. She knew deep down that I looked incredible, but she could never admit it. It is a bit much, isn't it? Dominique sniffed, crossing her arms over the white dress she was still wearing. It looks pretentious. And it is too tight in the hips. You look like you are trying too hard to be wealthy. Stick to your lane, Jasmine. I signaled Sarah. I will take it, and I will take the cathedral veil with the pearl inlay. Mom gasped. Jasmine, have you lost your mind? That is thousands of dollars. You cannot put that on a credit card. Hunter is not going to bail you out when the bill comes. I do not need Hunter, Mom. I walked to the register still in the dress. I pulled out my own card. Not Elijah's black card. My card. The one connected to the account where I deposited the bonuses from my private restoration commissions in Europe. Dominique watched me swipe the card. She waited for the decline. She wanted the decline. She wanted to laugh. Approved. The machine beeped. Sarah smiled. I will have this pressed and shipped to your address, Jasmine. You look breathtaking. I turned to Dominique, who looked like she had swallowed a lemon. You should take that off, Dominique. White really isn't your color. It highlights the jealousy in your complexion. I went back to the dressing room, changed into my jeans, and walked out without waiting for them. I felt lighter than air. I had the dress. I had the power. But as I drove home, my phone buzzed. It was an Instagram notification. Dominique had posted a photo. It was a picture of me. Not in the stunning amsale gown I had bought, but a sneak photo she had taken when I was trying on the first hideous, ill-fitting ruffled dress she had forced me into. My posture looked slumped. The lighting was unflattering, and the dress looked cheap and ridiculous. The caption read, "Helping my baby sister pick a dress for her big day. It is a struggle to find something that works with her. Unique shape and budget. But we are trying, #bridezilla, /charity, work, /sisters. Pray for her fashion sense." Comments were already rolling in from her friends and our extended family. Oh wow, brave choice. She looks healthy. You are such a good sister for helping her, Dom. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. She had stolen the moment again. She had taken my victory and twisted it into a public humiliation. She wanted the world to see me as the ugly duckling, the charity case, the failure. Let her have her likes, I whispered to the empty car. Let her post her pictures. Because on October 15th, when I walked down the aisle of the Onyx Hall in a $6,000 gown that I bought with my own money holding the hand of a man who owns the building, she is going to realize that she isn't the main character of this story. She is just the villain, and villains always lose in the end. 3 days before the wedding, my phone buzzed with a text from Dominique. It was a picture of a bottle of expensive scotch and a caption that read, "Finally teaching your man how to drink like a gentleman. Do not wait up." Hunter had invited Elijah to what he called a peace-offering bachelor party. I begged Elijah not to go. I knew it was a trap. Hunter had spent the last 3 months trying to humiliate us, and suddenly he wanted to buy my fiancé a drink. It smelled like trouble. But Elijah just kissed my forehead and told me to trust him. He said he wanted to see exactly how low Hunter was willing to sink. The venue Hunter chose was the Obsidian Room, a dimly lit members-only lounge where the leather chairs cost more than my car, and the air smelled of Cuban cigars and old money. Hunter was already seated in a private booth when Elijah arrived, flanked by 2 of his loud finance bros. They were laughing about a merger, but they went silent when Elijah approached. Hunter did not stand up. He just gestured to the empty seat opposite him. "Glad you could make it, big guy," Hunter said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "I thought we should clear the air before the big day. No hard feelings about the job offer, right? Just business." Elijah sat down, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "No hard feelings, Hunter. I appreciate the invitation." Hunter snapped his fingers, and a waitress appeared with a bottle of whiskey that looked older than me. He poured 2 glasses, sliding one toward Elijah. But before Elijah could reach for it, a woman in a tight red dress materialized from the shadows. She was stunning with long dark hair and a perfume that filled the booth. She stumbled slightly, falling right into Elijah's lap. "Oh, I am so sorry." She giggled, her hand lingering on Elijah's chest a little too long. "I am so clumsy. You are strong, aren't you?" She looked up at him through her lashes, and I could see Hunter pulling out his phone under the table, ready to snap a picture. This was the setup, a compromising position, a photo of the groom with a stripper on his lap 3 days before the wedding. It was a classic cheap, dirty trick. Elijah gently but firmly held the woman by her arms and set her back on her feet. He didn't look flustered. He didn't look tempted. He looked bored. "You seem to have lost your balance," Miss Elijah said calmly. "The floor is level, so perhaps you should switch to water." The woman looked confused. She glanced at Hunter for instruction. Hunter glared at her, signaling her to try harder. She leaned in again, whispering something in Elijah's ear, but Elijah turned his attention to the glass of whiskey Hunter had poured. He lifted it to his nose and inhaled deeply. Then he set it back down without taking a sip. Hunter frowned. "What is the matter? Not good enough for you. That is a 50-year-old single malt. It costs $200 a shot. Drink up, unless you are afraid you cannot handle the good stuff." Elijah picked up the bottle itself. He ran his thumb over the label, then checked the foil seal around the neck. He tilted the bottle against the light. "It is not the age I am worried about," Elijah said, his voice cutting through the ambient jazz music. "It is the authenticity. This is not 50-year-old Scotch, Hunter. This is cheap grain alcohol mixed with caramel coloring and put into a refillable bottle. I would estimate this bottle costs about $15 at a wholesale discount store." Hunter slammed his hand on the table. "Are you calling me a liar? I ordered the best bottle in the house. You clearly do not know what luxury tastes like because you have been drinking tap water your whole life." Elijah signaled for the floor manager. A man in a sharp tuxedo hurried over, looking annoyed at being summoned. "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" the manager asked, looking exclusively at Hunter, assuming he was the important one. "My guest here thinks your scotch is fake," Hunter sneered. "Tell him he is an idiot so we can get back to drinking." The manager looked at Elijah with a condescending sneer. "Sir, the Obsidian Room prides itself on its cellar. If your palate is not refined enough to appreciate the complexity of this vintage, I can bring you a beer." Elijah did not raise his voice. He simply turned the bottle around and pointed to a microscopic serial number laser etched onto the bottom of the glass. "Batch number 4022, Elijah recited from memory. "Produced in a distribution center in New Jersey that was shut down 3 weeks ago for counterfeiting premium spirits. The distribution manifest for this lot was flagged by the Logistics Oversight Committee." The manager froze. His condescending smile vanished. How could you possibly know that?" the manager stammered. "Because my company handles the supply chain logistics for 90% of the premium alcohol distributors in this state," Elijah said, leaning forward. "And I personally signed the order to blacklist this batch. If this bottle is on your table, it means you are buying from the gray market to cut costs, which is a violation of your liquor license." Hunter looked back and forth between Elijah and the manager, confused. What is he talking about? Is the booze fake or not? The manager's face went pale. He looked at Elijah, really looked at him, and recognition dawned in his eyes. He realized he was standing in front of the man who could revoke his supply contracts with a single phone call. Mr. Brooks, the manager whispered, his hands shaking. "I had no idea you were a patron tonight. This is a misunderstanding. A supplier error." I will remove this immediately. Please allow me to bring you the real reserve from the owner's private collection. On the house. Hunter, completely missing the dynamic, puffed out his chest. That is right. You better apologize. I am a VIP here. Bring us the real stuff. And keep it coming. The manager scurried away and returned with a dusty, sealed bottle that was actually worth more than Hunter's car. He poured it for Elijah with trembling hands. Hunter, eager to reassert dominance and cover his embarrassment, downed his drink in one gulp. Then another. Then another. He wanted to prove he was the big man. He wanted to drink Elijah under the table. Keep up, Elijah. Hunter slurred his face, flushing red. You think you are smart because you memorized some numbers. You are still just a nobody. I am going to ruin you. After the wedding, I am going to make sure you never work in this town. Elijah sipped his water, watching Hunter self-destruct. The woman in the red dress, realizing the plan had failed and that Hunter was becoming a sloppy mess, quietly slipped away. Hunter kept drinking, fueled by rage and insecurity. An hour later, the master of the universe was slumped over the mahogany table. His expensive Italian suit was stained with drool. He tried to stand up to give a toast to his own greatness, but his legs gave out. He pitched forward violently, retching all over the Persian rug and his own shoes. The finance bros stepped back in disgust. The manager rushed over, looking horrified. Get him out of here, the manager hissed to security. Elijah stood up, not a hair out of place. He pulled out his wallet and handed $100 bill to the cleaning staff. Put him in a taxi, Elijah instructed the bouncer. Send him to his home address, and make sure the driver knows to charge him a cleaning fee if he gets sick in the car. Elijah walked out of the club, leaving Hunter groaning on the floor in a puddle of his own making. When he got home to me, he smelled of fresh air and victory. Did you have fun? I asked, checking him for signs of distress. It was educational. Elijah smiled, taking off his jacket. Hunter learned a valuable lesson tonight. Never try to poison a man who owns the antidote. The next morning, Dominique called me screaming. A taxi driver had dumped a semi-conscious vomit-covered Hunter on their front lawn at 2 a.m, and pinned to his lapel was a dry cleaning bill from the taxi company for $300. Your fiancé is a monster, Dominique shrieked. He got my husband drunk and abandoned him. I looked at Elijah, who was making pancakes in our kitchen, humming a soft tune. He didn't abandon him, Dominique, I said calmly. He just returned the package. Logistics, remember. Elijah is very good at delivery. The night before our wedding, the air in the private dining room was thick enough to cut with a knife. We were at a steakhouse that Hunter had selected mostly because he wanted to flirt with the hostesses and show off his platinum credit card. My mother, Mama Joyce, sat at the head of the table, rearranging the floral centerpieces because she claimed they were not symmetrical enough. Dominique was busy critiquing the menu, complaining loudly that the filet mignon was overpriced for a domestic cut. Beside me, Elijah sat quietly, holding my hand under the tablecloth. He looked handsome in his simple button-down shirt, but to my family he was just a prop, a placeholder groom who was lucky to be invited to his own dinner. The tension shifted when Hunter stood up. He tapped his knife against his wine glass, the sharp, clinking sound silencing the room. He adjusted his silk tie and puffed out his chest, looking like a rooster preparing to crow. He had that gleam in his eye, the one that meant he was about to talk about himself. Family, Hunter began, his voice booming. I know we are here to rehearse for tomorrow, but I have some news that is honestly bigger than a wedding. I wanted to share it with you all, because, well, I am the one carrying this family to the promised land. Dominique clapped her hands excitedly. Tell them, baby. Tell them what you told me in the car. Hunter grinned, looking directly at my mother. Mama Joyce, you might want to order the lobster tonight. I am about to become a very rich man. My firm is in the final stages of closing a massive partnership deal with a logistics giant. You might have heard of them. EJ Logistics Group. I felt Elijah's hand tighten slightly around mine. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep my face completely neutral. I took a sip of water to hide the smile that was threatening to break through. EJ Logistics Hunter continued pacing around the table like he was giving a TED Talk. They are the biggest supply chain player on the East Coast. They control everything from farm to table for the entire tri-state area. And guess who is leading the negotiations for the merger? Me. My mother gasped, clasping her hands over her heart. Oh, Hunter, that is incredible. Is it a done deal? It is 99% done, Hunter bragged. I have been communicating with their acquisition team all week. If I land this, and I will land this, the partners at my firm have promised me a massive promotion. I will be the youngest senior partner in the company's history. We are talking 7 figures, folks. He stopped behind Elijah's chair and rested his hands heavily on Elijah's shoulders. He squeezed them not in a friendly way, but in a condescending display of dominance. And here is the funny part, Hunter said, looking down at Elijah. The CEO of EJ Logistics is a legend. Nobody sees him. He is like a ghost. But rumor has it he is a self-made man. Started from nothing. A real grinder. I heard he fires people if they are even 1 minute late. He despises laziness. Hunter leaned in closer to Elijah's ear. You should take notes, big guy. This CEO would eat someone like you for breakfast. He values ambition. He values hustle. He doesn't respect men who are content with washing dishes or clearing tables. If you ever met him, he probably wouldn't even let you shine his shoes. I looked at Elijah. His expression was calm, almost serene. He slowly reached for his glass of water and took a sip. Is that so? Elijah asked, his voice steady. He sounds like a difficult man to work for. He is a winner, Hunter corrected him sharply. And winners are always difficult because they demand excellence. I feel a connection with him, honestly. Even though we haven't met face to face yet, I feel like we are cut from the same cloth. We speak the same language. The language of success. I had to look down at my plate to stop myself from laughing out loud. The irony was so potent, it almost tasted sweet. Hunter had no idea that EJ stood for Elijah and Jasmine. We had started the company 5 years ago in a dusty garage, moving boxes ourselves, driving rented trucks until our backs ached. I handled the books and the restoration of old contracts while Elijah handled the operations. We built it brick by brick, staying in the shadows, letting our work speak for itself. The ghost CEO Hunter admired so much was sitting right in front of him wearing a $30 shirt and enduring his insults. Hunter returned to his seat beaming with pride. So Hunter said, raising his glass, to EJ Logistics, and to me for being smart enough to close the deal of the century. My mother and Dominique raised their glasses enthusiastically. To Hunter they chorused. I raised my glass too. To EJ I said, looking directly at Elijah, may the truth always come to light. Hunter didn't catch the double meaning. He downed his wine and signaled for the waiter to bring another bottle. Speaking of celebrating, Hunter announced, his voice getting louder as the alcohol hit his system. I have decided to give you guys a little wedding present. I know you two are struggling to pay for the bar tab tomorrow. I know you probably plan to serve cheap beer and boxed wine. Dominique giggled. Boxed wine is generous. I thought they were just going to serve tap water. Hunter waved his hand dismissively. Well, fear not. I made a call to the inventory manager at my firm. We have a corporate cellar stocked with Dom Perignon for client events. Since I am practically a senior partner now, I told them to load up a few cases and send them over to the Onyx Hall for the reception. My eyes widened. Hunter, I said. Are you saying you are taking champagne from your company's inventory? Without authorization. Hunter rolled his eyes. Relax, Jasmine. It is called a perk. When you are at my level, nobody counts a few bottles. Besides, I am bringing in millions of dollars with this EJ deal. They owe me. Consider it my donation to the cause. I just want to make sure the guests don't die of thirst while watching you two pretend to be royalty. He looked at Elijah with a smirk. You are welcome, by the way. Try not to drink it all yourself. I know how you people get when you see free stuff. Elijah stared at Hunter, his eyes cold and calculating. "Thank you, Hunter," Elijah said. "That is very revealing of you. I am sure your company appreciates your initiative." Hunter laughed, oblivious to the fact that he had just confessed to embezzlement in front of the owner of the logistics company that audited his firm's supply chain. "Yeah, well, that is the difference between us," Hunter said, leaning back in his chair. "I take what I want. You wait for scraps." The rest of the dinner was a blur of Hunter's arrogance and Dominique's cruel jokes. They talked about how they were going to spend Hunter's bonus. Dominique wanted a new G-Wagon. Hunter wanted a boat. They planned their future on money that didn't exist based on a deal with a man they were actively insulting. As we walked out of the restaurant, the cool night air felt cleansing. Hunter and Dominique stumbled toward the valet, laughing loudly. Hunter shouted something about being the king of the world. Elijah put his arm around my waist and pulled me close. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I rested my head on his shoulder. "I am better than okay. I just realized something." "What is that?" he asked. "Hunter thinks he is closing a deal with you," I whispered. "But he just signed his own confession." Elijah kissed the top of my head. "He thinks he is a shark, Jasmine. But he forgets that sharks have to keep moving to survive. And tomorrow he is going to hit a wall." We watched them drive away in their leased luxury car, speeding recklessly into the night. They were driving toward a cliff, pressing the gas pedal to the floor, convinced they were flying. And tomorrow at the altar, gravity was finally going to take over. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But then I remembered the way he looked at Elijah, the way he called him lazy, the way he stole from his own company to look like a hero. And I knew that when the crash came, I wouldn't look away. I would be sitting in the front row holding the hand of the man who built the wall they were about to hit. The night before my wedding was supposed to be filled with anticipation and joy. It should have been a time for last-minute beauty treatments, sentimental toasts, and nervous excitement about starting a new chapter. Instead, I was sitting in my mother's living room, feeling like a prisoner on death row, waiting for the executioner to arrive. The air in the house was thick with unspoken tension. My mother, Mama Joyce, was aggressively fluffing pillows on the sofa, refusing to look me in the eye. She was still angry that I had not surrendered the venue to Dominique, and her silence was her way of punishing me. Elijah sat beside me, his presence the only anchor keeping me from floating away into a panic attack. We had only stopped by to pick up some family heirlooms that my grandmother had left for me, items my mother had held hostage until the very last minute. I just wanted to get the old pearl earrings and leave, but as usual, escaping this house was never that simple. Just as we were heading for the door, the front lock clicked. Dominique and Hunter breezed in, bringing with them a gust of cold air and an even colder energy. Dominique was carrying a large, battered cardboard box that looked like it had spent the last decade in a damp basement. Hunter trailed behind her, looking hungover and sullen, his eyes bloodshot from the humiliation at the bar, though he refused to acknowledge it. "Oh, good, you are still here," Dominique chirped, her voice dripping with that fake sugary sweetness that always preceded an insult. "We caught you just in time." She dropped the heavy box onto the coffee table with a thud that made the porcelain figurines on the mantel rattle. Dust motes danced in the air around it. "What is this?" I asked, eyeing the box warily. Dominique clapped her hands together. "It is a wedding gift. A surprise for the groom." She looked at Elijah with a pitying smile. "We were talking last night, Hunter and I, about your financial situation. We know how expensive tuxedos are to rent. And honestly, those rental suits are so tacky. They are made of cheap polyester, and hundreds of other men have sweated in them. We didn't want you standing at the altar looking like a high school prom date." Hunter leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "Yeah, we figured we would help you out. Save you some cash so you can maybe afford to take Jasmine out for a burger on your honeymoon." Dominique ripped the tape off the box and opened the flaps. Immediately, a smell hit me. It was a pungent, stale odor of mothballs, old cedar, and underlying body odor. She reached in and pulled out a gray, pinstriped suit jacket. It was hideous. The fabric was shiny with age, the lapels were comically wide, and there was a distinct yellow discoloration around the collar. It looked like something a car salesman would have worn in 1995. "This is Hunter's old power suit," Dominique announced proudly, holding it up against her body. "He wore this when he got his first internship on Wall Street 10 years ago. It is a designer label Elijah. Hugo Boss. Vintage." She thrust the jacket toward Elijah. "It might be a little big in the shoulders since Hunter has a swimmer's build, but you can pin it back. It is definitely an upgrade from whatever you were planning to wear. Consider it our contribution to making you look presentable. We do not want you embarrassing the family in front of our guests." I stared at the jacket. I could see a small moth hole near the pocket. I looked at Hunter, who was smirking. This wasn't a gift. This was a power move. They wanted Elijah to walk down the aisle in Hunter's cast-offs. They wanted him to look ridiculous, ill-fitting, and poor standing next to their designer outfits. They wanted a visual representation of the hierarchy they had created in their heads. Hunter, the master; Elijah, the beggar. My blood turned to lava. The exhaustion I had felt all week evaporated, replaced by a pure, white-hot rage. I stood up and snatched the jacket from Dominique's hands. The fabric felt gross and oily against my skin. "You want him to wear this?" I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed fury. "You want my husband to get married in a suit that smells like a retirement home closet?" Dominique rolled her eyes. "You are being dramatic, Jasmine. Dry clean it and it will be fine. It is $1,000 suit. You should be saying thank you. Beggars cannot be choosers." "He is not a beggar," I snapped. I walked over to the kitchen trash can, the large metal one in the corner. I stepped on the pedal, the lid popped open, and I shoved the gray jacket deep into the garbage right on top of the coffee grounds and eggshells from breakfast. "He is not wearing your husband's garbage, Dominique. And he is certainly not wearing anything that has touched Hunter's skin." The room went dead silent. You could hear the refrigerator humming. Dominique stared at the trash can, her mouth open in shock. Hunter pushed himself off the wall, his face turning red. "Hey!" he shouted. "That is a classic suit. You just threw away money." My mother, who had been watching from the hallway, suddenly rushed forward. Her face was twisted in anger. She didn't look at the suit. She didn't look at the insult Dominique had just delivered. She only saw me, her scapegoat daughter, defying the golden child. She marched up to me, and before I could even flinch, her hand cracked across my face. The slap was loud and sharp. My cheek stung, heat radiating from the impact. My head snapped to the side. I stood there stunned, tasting the metallic tang of blood where my tooth had cut my inner lip. "How dare you, Mama Joyce?" hissed her finger, shaking in my face. "Your sister tries to do something nice for you, tries to help you save money, and you throw it in her face. You are an ungrateful, jealous little brat. I raised you better than this. Apologize to her, now. Fish that suit out and apologize." I slowly turned my head back to look at her. My own mother. She had never slapped Dominique. Not when Dominique stole money from her purse, not when Dominique crashed her car, but she slapped me for refusing to let my fiancé be humiliated. I started to speak, but my voice broke. "I am not apologizing," I whispered. Mom raised her hand again. "Do not you defy me, Jasmine." But before her hand could come down a second time, a strong grip caught her wrist in midair. Elijah. He had moved across the room faster than I had ever seen him move. He didn't squeeze her wrist, he didn't hurt her, but he held her firm, stopping the blow inches from my face. His expression was terrifying. It wasn't the anger of a man who shouts. It was the cold, absolute stillness of a glacier. His eyes, usually so warm, were dark and impenetrable. "That is enough," Elijah said. His voice was low, barely above a whisper, but it carried more weight than any scream I had ever heard. He slowly lowered my mother's hand and released it. She stumbled back a step, looking frightened for the first time. She rubbed her wrist, though he hadn't left a mark. "You do not touch her again," Elijah said. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not ever. Hunter stepped forward, trying to regain control of the situation. Hey, do not touch my mother-in-law, man. Who do you think you are? You are in her house. Elijah turned his gaze to Hunter. Hunter froze. It was the look of a predator deciding whether or not to eat its prey. We are leaving, Elijah said. He walked over to the trash can. For a second, I thought he was going to take the suit out, but he didn't. He looked at the gray fabric nestled in the garbage, then looked at Dominique. Thank you for the thought, Dominique. Elijah said, his voice smooth and icy. But I do not need Hunter's hand-me-downs. You see, I believe a man's clothes should reflect his true value. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. And frankly, if I wore that suit, I would be depreciating my assets. Tomorrow, I will wear something that matches who I really am. I suggest you do the same. Although I am not sure they make suits that can cover up the kind of ugliness I have seen in this room tonight. Dominique gasped. You arrogant piece of... Elijah didn't let her finish. He took my hand, his grip gentle and protective. Come on, Jasmine. We have a wedding to get to, and we have nothing left to say to these people until I see them at the altar. He led me out the front door, past my mother who was still clutching her chest, past Hunter who was fuming impotently, and past Dominique who was staring at the trash can where her power move lay rotting among the refuse. As we walked to the car, the night air cooled my burning cheek. I started to cry silent tears of shock and pain. Elijah stopped at the driver's side door. He pulled me into his arms and held me tight. I buried my face in his chest, smelling his clean soap and the fresh scent of the night, washing away the smell of that old moth-eaten suit. I am sorry, I sobbed. I am so sorry you have to deal with them. Shh, Elijah whispered, stroking my hair. Do not be sorry. Be ready. Ready for what I asked, looking up at him. He wiped the tear from my cheek with his thumb, his eyes fierce in the moonlight. Ready for tomorrow. They wanted to show Jasmine. They wanted to see us crumble. But tomorrow when those doors open, they are going to realize they spent their whole lives betting against the house, and the house always wins. He opened the car door for me. Go get some sleep, Mrs. Brooks. You have a very big day ahead of you. And trust me, that slap was the last thing your mother will ever give you. From now on, the only thing they will be giving us is respect. Even if I have to force it down their throats. We drove away into the dark, leaving the toxic house behind. My cheeks still throbbed, but my heart felt strange. It wasn't breaking anymore. It was hardening. It was turning into a diamond. Pressure does that to carbon. And after tonight, I knew one thing for sure. The Jasmine. They knew the Jasmine they could slap and insult and bully. She stayed back there in that living room. The woman who was going to walk down the aisle tomorrow was someone entirely new, and she was coming for blood. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the bridal suite at the Onyx Hall, casting a golden glow over the room. I sat in front of the vanity mirror, watching the makeup artist apply the final touches of blush to my cheeks. For the first time in my life, I felt like royalty. Elijah had not held back. He had transformed the venue into a palace. The air was thick with the scent of thousands of white orchids imported overnight from Holland, arranging in cascading waterfalls down the grand staircase. Outside the suite, I could hear the faint, elegant tuning of a 40-piece symphony orchestra that he had hired to play me down the aisle. It was perfect. It was peaceful. And then my family arrived. I heard them before I saw them. The heavy oak doors of the suite burst open, not with a knock, but with the force of a raid. My mother, Mama Joyce, marched in first, her eyes wide, scanning the room not with pride, but with suspicious calculation. Behind her came Dominique and Hunter. When I saw Dominique, my breath caught in my throat. She was not wearing the matron of honor dress I had selected. She was wearing a white gown, a floor-length white lace gown, with a train heavily beaded and a neckline that plunged aggressively low. She had styled her hair in an elaborate updo with a diamond tiara. She looked like a bride. In fact, she looked like she was trying to be the bride. Dominique stopped in the middle of the room, her mouth hanging open, as she took in the luxury around her. She looked at the silk robes my bridesmaids were wearing, the crystal flutes of vintage champagne on the table, and the custom-made jewelry sets I had gifted them. "What is all this?" Dominique whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and fury. Hunter walked past her, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. He looked at the bottle of champagne on the vanity. It was a rare vintage far more expensive than the corporate stock he had bragged about stealing the night before. He looked out the window at the fleet of security guards patrolling the perimeter, men in earpieces who looked like Secret Service agents. This is impossible," Hunter stammered. "I checked the rates for this suite. It is $5,000 an hour. The orchestra alone is 50 grand. Jasmine, what did you do?" I spun my chair around to face them. "I am getting married, Hunter. This is what a wedding looks like. No, this is what a crime scene looks like." Hunter snapped, his face turning red. "There is no way you paid for this. You fix old books, and your fiancé is a waiter." "I did the math, Jasmine. Even if you saved every penny you ever earned, you couldn't afford the flowers in the lobby, let alone this entire production." He turned to Dominique, grabbing her arm. "I told you, Dom. I told you something was wrong. This smells like dirty money." Dominique pulled her arm away, staring at me with pure venom. She walked closer, her white dress rustling loudly. "Where did you get the money, Jasmine?" she demanded. "Did you go to a loan shark? Are there going to be guys with baseball bats waiting outside to break our legs when the check bounces?" I stood up, smoothing the silk of my robe. "My money is clean, Dominique. Why is it so hard for you to believe that I can have nice things?" "Because you," Dominique screamed, losing her composure. "You are the screw-up. You are the one who needed my old clothes. You do not get to have a symphony orchestra. I had a DJ who played from an iPod." "This is not right." She turned to Hunter, her eyes manic. "Hunter, think. Where could she get this kind of cash? Liquid cash." Hunter paced the room, running his hands through his hair. Then he stopped. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing into slits. A look of dark realization crossed his face. "The safe," Hunter whispered. "What safe?" Mama Joyce asked, stepping forward. "The office safe," Hunter said, his voice rising in accusation. "Last month when we went on vacation, I gave Jasmine the emergency key to my office to water the plants. I gave her the alarm code." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "There is a petty cash fund in the floor safe, and access codes to the client escrow accounts. I kept them written down in the ledger." "You took it, didn't you?" My jaw dropped. "You think I stole from your company? It is the only explanation," Hunter shouted. "You used the key. You memorized the codes. You embezzled the money to pay for this fantasy wedding because you were jealous of us. You are trying to outshine us with my own money." Dominique gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "Oh my God. Jasmine, how could you?" "That is a felony. You are going to go to prison." "I am not going to let you ruin my career," Hunter yelled. "I am calling the police." "No, wait. If I call the police now, it will be a scandal. It will ruin the EJ deal." He looked at Dominique, panic in his eyes. "We have to handle this internally. We have to stop the wedding, get the money back, and cover it up before the partners find out." Dominique's face shifted from shock to a twisted form of triumph. She finally had the weapon she needed. She smoothed her white dress, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "You are right, Hunter," she said calmly. "We cannot let her go through with this. Imagine the shame when the police drag her off the altar." She turned to me. "Jasmine, listen to me. We know what you did. But because we are family, we are going to give you a chance. Call it off. Go out there and tell the guests you are sick. Cancel the ceremony. We will tell everyone it is postponed. Then we will turn this into a party for Hunter and me. My vow renewal. We will use the venue so the money isn't wasted." "And you?" You can work out a payment plan to pay Hunter back." I stared at them. They were delusional. They were so blinded by their own arrogance that they had invented a felony just to make sense of my success. "I am not canceling anything," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Get out of my suite." Dominique laughed. She walked over to the intercom system on the wall that connected to the backstage manager. She pressed the button. "Hello, this is the bride's sister." Dominique spoke into the mic. "There has been a change of plans. The bride is not feeling well. We are switching the music. Please cue the playlist labeled Dominique and Hunter Vows. And tell the orchestra to pack up. We want upbeat pop music, not this funeral dirge." She released the button and looked at me. "It is over, Jasmine. I am doing this for your own good." She grabbed a tube of bright red lipstick from my vanity, a shade far too garish for a bride, and aggressively applied it to her lips. She looked like a clown, a caricature of a villain. "Hunter, go find the venue manager," Dominique commanded. "Tell him the billing contact has changed. Tell him to send all final invoices to us so we can document the theft. We need evidence when we confront her later." Hunter nodded, looking righteous. "You are lucky we are such good people, Jasmine. Anyone else would have let you rot in a cell." He stormed out of the room. Dominique adjusted her diamond tiara in the mirror standing next to me. In the reflection, we looked like opposites. Me in my elegant robe, her in her stolen bridal glory. "You look pathetic," she whispered to my reflection. "Trying to be something you are not. A waiter's wife should know her place." She turned and swept out of the room, her white train trailing behind her. I stood there for a moment in the silence. My hands were shaking not from fear but from adrenaline. They really believed it. They believed I was a criminal. They were so desperate to be superior that they had convinced themselves I was a thief. I picked up the intercom button Dominique had just pressed. "Hello? Are you there?" I asked. A voice crackled back. "Yes, Mrs. Brooks. We heard the request. Should we ignore it?" I smiled. "Yes. Ignore everything she said. But do me a favor. Ensure the microphone at the altar is live, and tell the security team to stand by." "Understood, ma'am." I looked at myself in the mirror one last time. I didn't see the scared little sister anymore. I saw a woman who was about to drop a nuclear bomb on the people who had tormented her for 30 years. I picked up my bouquet of white lilies. "Let them play their games," I whispered. "Let them think they have won. Because when I walk out there, they are going to find out that the man they called a victim is actually the judge, the jury, and the executioner. And court is about to be in session." The moment the heavy oak doors of the grand ballroom swung open, the world seemed to hold its breath. The 40-piece symphony orchestra swelled into a crescendo, filling the vast cathedral like space with a melody so hauntingly beautiful it brought tears to the eyes of strangers. I stood at the threshold, clutching my bouquet of white lilies, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel like the girl who cleaned up everyone else's mess. I felt powerful. The Amsale gown I had purchased with my own hard-earned money flowed around me, like liquid marble, the silk trumpet silhouette hugging every curve before flaring out in a dramatic train that commanded attention. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of thousands of imported orchids, and took my first step onto the white runner. As I walked, I saw the faces of the 300 guests turn toward me. There were gasps. Audible whispers of admiration rippled through the pews. These were people who had known me as the quiet, mousy sister, the one who stood in the background while Dominique shone. But today, they were not looking at Dominique, they were looking at me. And then I saw my family. They were sitting in the front row on the left, the place of honor they did not deserve. My mother. Mama Joyce was clutching her purse tightly, her lips pursed in a thin line of disapproval. She refused to look me in the eye instead, scanning the room with a critical sneer, likely calculating how much debt she thought I was in. Next to her sat Hunter, looking sweaty and erratic, his eyes darting toward the exits as if he expected the police to burst in at any moment. But it was Dominique who made my blood turn cold. She was standing slightly apart from the pew, posing as if she were the one walking down the aisle. She was wearing the white lace wedding gown she had stolen the spotlight with at the bridal salon. It was a grotesque display of narcissism. She had styled her hair in a bridal updo and was actually holding a small bouquet of her own. She looked at me with the mixture of hatred and anticipation, a predator waiting for the trap to snap shut. She wanted me to look at her. She wanted me to feel small. I simply looked through her as if she were made of glass. My eyes locked on the end of the aisle. Elijah was waiting for me. He was breathtaking. He was wearing a custom Tom Ford tuxedo that cost more than Hunter's car. The midnight blue fabric was cut to perfection, accentuating his broad shoulders and tall frame. To anyone with taste, the quality was undeniable. The way the lapels caught the light, the precise break of the trousers, the silk bow tie tied by hand. But I knew what my family saw. They saw a waiter in a costume. They saw a poor man playing dress-up in a rental suit trying to fool the upper class. Elijah watched me walk toward him with a look of such intense love and pride that the rest of the room faded away. He didn't look worried about the scene my family was planning to cause. He looked ready. I reached the altar and took his hand. His skin was warm, his grip steady. The pastor, a venerable man with a deep, resonant voice, began the ceremony. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Elijah and Jasmine. The ceremony proceeded with an agonizing slowness. Every second that ticked by felt like a wire being pulled tighter. I could feel the heat radiating from the front row. I could hear Dominique shifting restlessly, the rustle of her white dress sounding like dry leaves skittering on pavement. Hunter was whispering furiously to her, pointing at his watch. They were running out of time. They had convinced themselves that I was a criminal, a fraud who had embezzled money from Hunter's company to pay for this fairy tale. In their twisted reality, they were the heroes who had to stop a crime in progress. The pastor cleared his throat and looked out at the congregation. If there is anyone present who knows just cause why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever, hold your peace. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the moment of tradition where usually nothing happens. But today, the air crackled with electricity. I squeezed Elijah's hand. Here it comes, I thought. Suddenly, a screech of feedback pierced the air. Dominique had lunged forward and snatched the microphone from the stand near the lectern. The sound was so jarring that several guests covered their ears. "Stop it!" Dominique screamed, her voice shrill and hysterical. "Stop this circus right now!" A collective gasp went through the hall. People stood up, craning their necks. My mother put her head in her hands, acting the part of the long-suffering matriarch, while Hunter stood up and buttoned his jacket, looking self-important. "This wedding is a fraud," Dominique yelled, pointing a manicured finger at me. She stood there in her white wedding dress, looking deranged, her chest heaving. "You are all being lied to. My sister Jasmine is a liar and a thief. Dominique, please." The pastor tried to intervene, but she shoved him aside. "No, I will not be silent," she shrieked. "Look at this. Look at the flowers. Look at the orchestra. Do you really think a woman who glues old books back together can afford this? Do you think this man, this waiter who serves drinks for a living, paid for this?" She turned to Elijah, her face twisted in a sneer. "We know what you are, Elijah. You are a gold digger, a con artist. You found my desperate, pathetic sister and convinced her to steal from her own family to fund your lifestyle. You are wearing a rental suit and standing there acting like you belong here, but you are nothing but trash." She swung back to the crowd, addressing the shocked guests. "My sister Jasmine embezzled money from my husband's company to pay for this wedding. She stole from the very people who put a roof over her head. We have the proof. We know about the safe, Jasmine. We know you took the codes." I stood there frozen, not in fear but in disbelief at the sheer scale of her delusion. She really believed it. She had crafted a narrative where I was the villain so she wouldn't have to face the reality that I was successful. Hunter stepped up to the microphone, pulling it from Dominique's hand. He adjusted his tie, trying to project the authority of a Wall Street executive. "I am a financial professional," Hunter announced, his voice booming. "I manage millions of dollars in assets. I can confirm that the funds used to secure this venue were obtained illegally from my firm's escrow accounts. I have already contacted the authorities." He pointed at the security guards lining the walls. "Security, do your jobs. Arrest these two frauds. Detain them until the police arrive. This ceremony is over." Hunter looked at the guards expectantly, waiting for them to rush the altar and tackle Elijah. He waited for the validation, for the applause, for the moment where he saved the day. But nobody moved. The security guards stood like statues, their arms crossed, their eyes fixed not on me, but on Hunter. The silence that followed was different from before. It was heavy, confused, and suffocating. The guests were murmuring, unsure if this was a skit or a tragedy. Dominique looked around wildly, realizing the guards were not obeying. "Why are you just standing there?" she screamed at the head of security. "My husband gave you an order. They are criminals. Get them off the stage." Still nobody moved. The orchestra sat with their instruments in their laps, watching the drama unfold. I looked at Elijah. He hadn't flinched once. He hadn't let go of my hand. He slowly turned his head to look at Hunter, then at Dominique. His expression was not angry. It was not defensive. It was the look a parent gives a toddler having a tantrum in a supermarket. It was then that I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Standing there, in a white dress at my wedding, screaming about money, desperate to tear me down because she couldn't stand to see me rise. I didn't feel hate anymore. I didn't feel anger. I felt pity. She was so small, so empty. She had built her entire life on the belief that she was better than me, and now that the illusion was shattering, she was breaking apart with it. Hunter, realizing he was losing control of the room, tried one last desperate gamble. "If you guards are part of this scam, you will be arrested too," he threatened, his voice cracking. "Do you know who I am? I am a senior partner at Sterling Financial. I am closing the EJ Logistics deal. I will have your badges." At the mention of EJ Logistics, Elijah finally moved. He let go of my hand gently and took a step forward. He didn't need a microphone. His voice, trained in boardrooms and negotiations, projected clearly to the back of the room. "You are closing the deal?" Hunter Elijah asked, his tone conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. Hunter blinked, caught off guard. "Yes. Yes, I am. And the CEO of that company is going to hear about how you ruined this wedding." Elijah smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "I think he already knows," Elijah said. He reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo. Hunter flinched as if expecting a weapon, but Elijah only pulled out a phone. He tapped the screen once and held it up. On the massive LED screens behind the altar, which were meant to display our names, the image changed. It wasn't a slideshow of photos. It was a live video feed. It was a feed of Hunter's office. Dominique looked at the screen, then at Elijah. "What is this? What are you doing?" Elijah looked at the head of security, the man Hunter had tried to command. "Mr. Henderson," Elijah said softly, "please escort the trespassers to the exit. But before you do, I think my fiancé has something to say." Elijah stepped back and handed me the microphone that Hunter had dropped in his confusion. I held the cold metal in my hand. I looked at the 300 faces staring at me. Then I looked at Dominique, who was trembling in her white dress, and Hunter, who was sweating through his suit. I took a breath. The air smelled of expensive orchids and victory. "You wanted to stop the wedding because of fraud," I said, my voice steady and amplified through the hall. "You wanted to talk about stolen money and fake identities." I walked closer to the edge of the stage, looking down at them. "So let's talk about it. But let's start with who really paid for this wedding, and who really owns the building you are standing in." Dominique's eyes widened in horror. She shook her head, mouthing the word no. But it was too late. The gavel had already come down. The silence in the Onyx Hall was heavy and suffocating. Hunter stood on the altar steps, his arm outstretched, pointing at Elijah, waiting for the security guards to spring into action. He looked like a conductor trying to lead an orchestra that had stopped playing. His face was flushed with the anticipation of victory, expecting the rough hands of justice to grab my husband and drag him away. Dominique stood beside him, her chest heaving, a twisted smile plastered on her face as she waited for my humiliation to be complete. But nothing happened. The guards remained frozen, their arms crossed over their chests, their expressions unreadable behind dark sunglasses. They were not looking at Hunter with respect. They were looking at him with the kind of detached indifference a statue has for a pigeon. Hunter's smile faltered. He snapped his fingers aggressively. "I said arrest them!" Hunter barked, his voice cracking slightly. "Did you hear me? I am a senior partner at Sterling Financial. If you do not move right now, I will have your jobs. I will sue this entire hotel for harboring criminals." Still, the guards did not move. Just as the tension threatened to snap, the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open again. This time it wasn't a guest or a confused waiter. A phalanx of men in sharp black suits marched in, moving with military precision. In the center of the formation walked a man who radiated authority. He was an older white man, with silver hair, wearing a suit that clearly cost more than most people's annual salary. He walked with a stride that said he owned the ground beneath his feet. Dominique's eyes lit up. She grabbed Hunter's arm, her fingernails digging into his jacket. "Look," she hissed, her voice amplified by the microphone she was still clutching. "It is the general manager. I saw his picture in the lobby. Finally, someone with real power is here to take out the trash." She turned to me, her eyes gleaming with malice. "It is over, Jasmine," she whispered loud enough for the front row to hear. "The boss is here. He is going to throw you out on the street where you belong. Enjoy the walk of shame." Hunter straightened his tie, looking relieved. He stepped down from the altar to meet the approaching man, putting on his best business smile. He extended his hand, ready to network, ready to bond over their shared superiority. "Thank God you are here," Hunter said loudly, projecting his voice to the room. "I am Hunter, the man who called about the fraud. As you can see, these two imposters have hijacked your facility. I have already ordered security to detain them, but your staff seems incompetent. I trust you will handle this professionally." The general manager did not slow down. He did not look at Hunter's extended hand. He did not even blink. He walked straight toward Hunter, forcing my brother-in-law to scramble out of the way to avoid being run over. The older man walked right past him as if Hunter were nothing more than a piece of furniture. The general manager marched up the steps of the altar. Dominique stepped forward, ready to launch into her rehearsed speech about my theft and deception. "Sir, I am the bride's sister," she began, putting on her victim voice. "I am so sorry you have to deal with this. My sister is mentally unstable and her husband is a con artist. We just want them removed so we can—" She stopped mid-sentence. The general manager had walked right past her too. He stopped directly in front of Elijah. The room went deadly silent. 300 guests held their breath. My mother, Mama Joyce, stood up in the front pew, watching with wide eyes, waiting for the general manager to start shouting, waiting for the handcuffs, waiting for the end of Elijah. Instead, the silver-haired man did something that made the entire world stop spinning. He bowed. It was not a nod. It was a deep, respectful 90-degree bow. He held the position for a full 3 seconds, a display of subservience and immense respect that no one in that room had ever seen, certainly not directed at a man wearing what my family thought was a rental tuxedo. When the general manager straightened up, he looked Elijah in the eye, his expression filled with apology and reverence. "Mr. Brooks, the general manager," said, his voice clear and shaking slightly with nerves. "I offer you my deepest, most sincere apologies for this disturbance. I was in a meeting on the top floor and did not hear about the intrusion until moments ago. This is unacceptable." He gestured vaguely toward Hunter and Dominique without looking at them. "Chairman, do you want me to have this garbage removed from your stage immediately? Or would you prefer to handle them yourself?" The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. "Chairman." Dominique's hand went limp. The heavy microphone she had been holding slipped from her fingers. It hit the marble floor with a deafening thud that echoed through the speakers, followed by a high-pitched squeal of feedback. But nobody covered their ears. They were too paralyzed by shock. Hunter's jaw dropped so low it almost hit his chest. He blinked rapidly, his brain trying to process information that contradicted everything he believed. Chairman Hunter stammered, his voice sounding small and pathetic. "Wait, what did you call him?" The general manager slowly turned to face Hunter. The look of disdain on his face was withering. "I called him by his title," the manager said coldly. "You are standing in the presence of Mr. Elijah Brooks. He is the founder and chairman of the Onyx Collection. He owns this hotel. He owns the land it sits on. And he owns the hospitality group that manages 30 other luxury properties across the country." Hunter took a step back, looking like he had been punched in the gut. He looked at Elijah, then at the manager, then back at Elijah. "That is impossible," Hunter whispered. "He is a waiter. He drives a truck. He came to my office looking for a job." Elijah finally moved. He let go of my hand gently and stepped forward. He reached up and adjusted his silk cufflinks, a slow, deliberate movement that screamed power. He didn't look angry. He looked bored. He looked like a king watching a jester try to perform a trick that had failed miserably. He bent down and picked up the microphone Dominique had dropped. He dusted it off, checking it for scratches, then looked at Hunter. "I never asked you for a job, Hunter." Elijah said, his voice smooth and amplified, filling every corner of the ballroom. "You offered me one. And if you recall, I turned it down because your employment contract was full of labor violations." Elijah took a step closer to Hunter. Hunter shrank back, looking suddenly very small in his expensive suit. "You were so busy bragging about your deal with EJ Logistics," Elijah continued. "You were so busy talking about the ghost CEO, the man you admired, the man who hates laziness. You said you felt a connection with him. You said you spoke the same language." Elijah smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, Hunter, here I am." The color drained from Hunter's face so fast he looked like a corpse. His knees actually buckled and he had to grab the edge of the flower arrangement to stay upright. EJ Hunter wheezed. "Elijah." "Jasmine," Bingo Elijah said. "EJ. Logistics is the parent company of the Onyx Collection. We diversified our portfolio 5 years ago. I built the supply chain that moves the food, the linens, and the wine for every major hotel on the East Coast, including this one." Dominique let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. "No, no, this is a lie. He is lying. Hunter, tell him he is lying. He is a waiter. I saw flour on his shirt." Elijah turned his gaze to Dominique. "I bake bread for the homeless shelter on Tuesdays." "Dominique," he said calmly. "It is called charity. You should try it sometime. It is good for the soul. Although in your case it might be too late." He turned back to Hunter, who was now trembling visibly. "You called the police, didn't you?" Hunter, Elijah asked. "You accused my wife of embezzlement. You tried to ruin her reputation on the happiest day of her life. You stood there and told my security team to arrest the man who signs their paychecks." Hunter opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at the general manager, pleading with his eyes for some kind of help, but the manager was looking at Elijah, awaiting orders. "I have a question for you, Hunter," Elijah said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. "Do you know who signs your paychecks?" Hunter shook his head weakly. "No. I work for Sterling Financial. The partners—" Elijah chuckled. It was a dark, dry sound. Sterling Financial was struggling last quarter. They needed a liquidity injection to stay afloat. They quietly sold a 40% controlling stake to a private equity firm to avoid bankruptcy. Elijah took a step closer, towering over Hunter. "I own that private equity firm, Hunter." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. "I saw the employee manifest on my desk last week," Elijah continued mercilessly. "I saw your name, Vice President. I was going to let it slide. I was going to keep business and family separate. I was going to let you keep your little title and your little office and your delusions of grandeur. Elijah's face hardened. But then you insulted my wife. You tried to steal her joy. You called her a thief in front of everyone she loves. Elijah turned to the general manager. Get him out of my sight, Elijah commanded, and hand him his termination notice on the way out. Tell the legal department to freeze his corporate accounts immediately. I want a full audit of his expenses. If he bought so much as a paperclip with company money, I want him prosecuted. Hunter collapsed to his knees. No, Elijah. Please, I didn't know. We are family, Jasmine, tell him. We are family. I watched him beg. The man who had sneered at me for years. The man who had called my husband a servant. He was on his knees crying, ruining his expensive suit. I looked at Elijah. He held out his hand to me. I took it. We are not family, Hunter Elijah said, turning his back on him. You made that very clear when you asked us to leave your office. Security. Elijah said, his voice ringing with finality. Take out the trash. As the guards finally moved, grabbing Hunter and Dominique by the arms, the room erupted, but not with chaos, with applause. My guests, my friends, the people who actually loved me stood up and cheered. They watched as the false king and queen were dragged down the aisle screaming and crying while the real royalty stood on the stage untouched and victorious. The general manager stepped back into the shadows, leaving Elijah alone at the center of the stage. The spotlight seemed to intensify around my husband, catching the silk of his tuxedo and the steel in his eyes. Hunter stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, trying to process the impossibility of what he had just heard. The chairman, the owner, the man he had tried to hire as a security guard for $18 an hour. Elijah did not give him time to recover. He raised his right hand, snapping his fingers once. The sound was crisp and echoed through the silent ballroom. Instantly, the massive LED wall behind the altar, which was meant to display a montage of our relationship photos, flickered and changed. The soft romantic lighting was replaced by a stark professional blue background. A logo appeared projected 10 feet high. It was a stylized gold shield with two interlocking letters in the center, E and J. Below it, in bold white font, were the words, EJ Logistics Group. A murmur of recognition rippled through the crowd. Everyone in the city knew that logo. It was on the side of every delivery truck, every shipping container, and every warehouse in the industrial district. It was a billion-dollar brand. But the screen did not stop there. Next to the logo, a digital document appeared. It was a personnel file. Hunter's personnel file. It showed his ID photo, looking smug and overly confident, listed under the header, Candidate for Strategic Partnership. And stamped across the file in bright red letters was the word pending. Elijah turned to look at the screen, then back at Hunter. You have been talking about this company for months, Hunter. You told everyone at dinner last night that you were the only one smart enough to close the deal with EJ Logistics. You said you felt a spiritual connection to the founders. You said you spoke their language. Elijah took a step closer, his voice dropping to a conversational volume that was somehow more terrifying than a shout. Did you never stop to ask yourself what the letters stood for? Hunter stared at the screen, sweat beading on his forehead. EJ, he whispered, his voice trembling. E stands for Elijah, my husband said, placing a hand on his own chest. And J, he turned and pointed a hand toward me. J stands for Jasmine. The revelation hit the room like a physical wave. I heard my mother gasp loudly from the front row. I saw the color drain completely from Dominique's face. The company they worshipped, the deal they were banking on to save their financial lives, was named after the sister they had called a failure and the man they had called a waiter. We started the company 5 years ago in a garage. Elijah continued, addressing the entire room now. Jasmine handled the books and the legal framework. I handled the operations. We built it from the ground up while you were busy leasing cars you could not afford and looking down on people who work with their hands. Elijah turned his focus back to Hunter, who was now shaking visibly. You insulted the co-founder of EJ Logistics to her face, Hunter. You called her a thief. You tried to have her arrested at her own wedding. And you did it all while bragging about how much money you were going to make off her company. That is not just stupidity. That is a special kind of arrogance. No, Hunter stammered, backing away until he bumped into the flower arrangements. This is a trick. It is Photoshop. You are lying. You are just a guy who bakes bread. I know the CEO. I have spoken to him. His name is Marcus. I talk to him every week. Elijah reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone again. He didn't look at the screen. He just held it up. You mean Marcus, my chief operating officer? Elijah asked. The man I hired to handle day-to-day negotiations because I prefer to stay out of the spotlight. Let us give Marcus a call. I think he is watching the live stream right now. Elijah tapped the screen and hit the speakerphone button. He held the microphone up to the phone so the entire room could hear the ringing tone. 1 ring, 2 rings. Click. Mr. Brooks, a deep professional voice boomed through the speakers. I am here. Hunter flinched as if he had been slapped. He recognized the voice. It was the man he had been trying to impress for months. Marcus, Elijah said calmly. Our friend Hunter here seems to be under the impression that this is a prank. Can you clarify the leadership structure of EJ Logistics for him? There was a pause on the line, followed by a sigh that sounded like pure disappointment. Hunter Marcus's voice cut through the air sharp and cold. I have told you repeatedly that I report to a board of directors. Mr. Elijah Brooks is the chairman of that board. He owns 51% of the company. His wife Jasmine owns the other 49%. They are the sole proprietors. Hunter's knees began to buckle. He looked like he was going to be sick, but Marcus Hunter whined, desperation creeping into his voice. The deal. We are closing on Monday. I promised the partners. There is no deal, Hunter Marcus replied. I was instructed by Mr. Brooks 10 minutes ago to terminate all negotiations with Sterling Financial immediately, but that is not the only reason I am on the line. Hunter froze. What do you mean? I am looking at your expense reports, Hunter Marcus said. The audit Mr. Brooks requested is quite revealing. It seems you have been charging personal luxury items to the corporate acquisition account, designer dresses, jewelry, and apparently several cases of Dom Perignon champagne that were removed from the inventory without authorization. Dominique let out a strangled cry. She looked down at the diamond bracelet on her wrist, suddenly realizing it was evidence of a crime. That is embezzlement, Hunter, Marcus continued. And combined with your conduct today, harassment of the chairman and his family, public slander, and gross negligence, I have contacted the managing partners at your firm. No, please, Hunter begged, tears streaming down his face, mixed with sweat. Do not call them. I can fix this. They are already on the other line, Marcus said. You are fired, Hunter. Effective immediately. Your company phone has been deactivated, your access badge has been revoked, and legal counsel advises you to find a lawyer because Sterling Financial will be pressing charges for the theft. The call ended with a click that sounded like a gunshot. Hunter stood there for 1 second longer, swaying like a tree cut at the roots. Then gravity took over. He collapsed to the floor, his legs giving out completely. He sat there in a heap of expensive fabric, sobbing into his hands, a broken man in front of 300 witnesses. The room was deadly silent, save for the pathetic sounds of Hunter's weeping. Then a scream pierced the air. It was Dominique. She was shaking her head violently, her hands gripping the sides of her white dress. Her mind had snapped. She could not process the reality shift. She could not accept that the sister she bullied was the billionaire she envied. No, Dominique shrieked, her voice raw and hysterical. This is fake. It is a recording. He is lying. She pointed a trembling finger at Elijah. Look at him. Look at his hands. He has flour under his fingernails. I saw it. He is a baker. He is a nobody. He cannot be the chairman. He cannot be richer than us. It is not fair. I am the special one. I am the one who deserves the Onyx Hall. She ran toward Hunter, grabbing him by the lapels and shaking him. Get up, Hunter. Get up and arrest him. Tell them he is a waiter. Tell them I am the bride. Hunter did not move. He just cried harder, curling into a ball. Dominique looked around the room, her eyes wild, searching for an ally. She looked at my mother. Mama, do something. Dominique screamed. Tell them. Tell them Jasmine is the failure. Tell them she is the charity case. Why are you just sitting there? Mama Joyce slowly stood up. But she did not look at Dominique. She looked at me. Her face was pale, her mouth slightly open. She was looking at the Amsale dress, the orchids, the security guards, the logo on the screen. The math was finally adding up in her head. She realized she had bet on the wrong daughter. She realized she had slapped the owner of the hand that fed her. She slowly sat back down, covering her face with her hands, refusing to meet Dominique's gaze. Elijah stepped forward, standing over the sobbing form of Hunter and the screaming figure of Dominique. He looked like a titan. It is over, Dominique, Elijah said quietly. The performance is finished. He signaled to the security guards who were waiting in the wings. Please remove these non-guests from the premises, Elijah ordered, and send the bill for the champagne they stole to their home address. Although I doubt they will be living there much longer. As the guards moved in to lift Hunter off the floor and grab Dominique's arms, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I had been carrying for 30 years. I watched them dragging my sister away, her white dress bunching up around her ankles, her screams fading as they pulled her toward the exit. She was still yelling that I was a fraud, that I was a book fixer, that I was nothing. But as I stood there holding the hand of the man who had built an empire just to give me a kingdom, I knew exactly who I was. I was Jasmine Brooks, co-owner of EJ Logistics, and I had just won the war without firing a single shot. Hunter was already on his knees, a sobbing mess of a man who had lost his job, his reputation, and his dignity in the span of 5 minutes. But Elijah was not finished. My husband stood over him like a judge delivering a final verdict, his expression devoid of pity. He motioned to the large screen behind us where the incriminating expense reports were still displayed. The room was silent save for the pathetic sounds of Hunter trying to catch his breath. Elijah took a step closer to the edge of the stage, looking down at Dominique, who was still trembling in her stolen white dress, clutching her diamond necklace as if it were a lifeline. There is one more thing you should know, Dominique, Elijah said, his voice echoing through the hall. You have spent the last hour bragging about your lifestyle. You walked in here wearing that gown, flashing that ring, acting like royalty. You called my wife a charity case because she buys her own clothes. But looking at these financial records, I see a very interesting pattern. Elijah tapped the screen. A new document appeared. It was a list of unauthorized transactions from the corporate escrow account. That engagement ring on your finger? Elijah continued, pointing at Dominique's hand. The 2-carat diamond you loved to shove in Jasmine's face. Hunter paid for it using the client acquisition fund. It belongs to Sterling Financial. And that dress you are wearing right now, the one you stole the spotlight with. It was charged to the company card as office supplies. Dominique looked down at her hand, then at her dress. She looked like she was wearing fire. The symbols of her superiority, the things she used to make me feel small, were nothing more than evidence of theft. You are not a wealthy woman, Dominique, Elijah said coldly. You are walking evidence. And frankly, you are an accessory to grand larceny. Before Dominique could scream, the heavy doors at the back of the room opened for the 3rd time. But this time it was not a guest or a manager. It was 4 uniformed police officers accompanied by 2 detectives in suits. They moved with a grim purpose that sucked the air out of the room. They walked straight down the aisle past the stunned guests, past my mother who was frozen in her seat, and up the stairs to the altar. Hunter Sterling, the lead detective, announced, pulling a pair of metal handcuffs from his belt. You are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and grand larceny. Stand up and put your hands behind your back. Hunter looked up at the officers, his eyes wide with terror. No, please. he whimpered. It is a mistake. I can pay it back. I just need time. Elijah, tell them. Tell them we are family. Elijah stepped back, wrapping his arm around my waist. He looked at Hunter with absolute indifference. I have already told them everything they need to know, Elijah said. The detective yanked Hunter to his feet. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was sharp and final. It was the sound of a false life crumbling. Hunter began to weep loudly, begging, pleading, snot running down his face, a pathetic contrast to the arrogant man who had tried to have me arrested just an hour ago. As the police began to drag Hunter away, Dominique snapped out of her trance. Reality crashed down on her. Her husband was going to prison. Her money was gone. Her house, her car, her clothes, everything was built on stolen funds. She was about to lose it all. Panic, raw and animalistic, took over. She looked around the room for a savior. She saw Hunter being led away and knew he could not help her. Mama, she screamed, turning to the front row. Mama, do something. They are taking him. They are going to take everything. My mother. Mama Joyce stood up. She looked at Hunter in handcuffs, then at Dominique in her stolen dress. Then slowly, her eyes turned to me. She looked at the luxury around us. She looked at Elijah, the chairman, the billionaire. And I saw the gears turning in her head. I saw the survival instinct of a narcissist kicking in. She realized that her golden child was now a liability, and her scapegoat was now the queen. She stepped out of the pew and rushed toward the altar, pushing past Dominique without even looking at her. She ran to the edge of the stage, reaching her hands out to me. Her face twisted into a mask of desperate affection. Jasmine, baby, she cried, tears streaming down her face. You have to stop this. You have to help your sister. We are family. You cannot let them ruin us. Talk to Elijah. Tell him to drop the charges. We can fix this. She looked at me with those eyes that used to make me crumble, the eyes that made me desperate for her approval my entire life. She thought she could still manipulate me. She thought she could appeal to the daughter who just wanted to be loved, but that daughter was gone. She had died the moment my mother slapped me for defending my husband. I looked down at her hands, reaching for the hem of my gown. I looked at her face, begging for mercy she had never shown me. Jasmine, please, my mother sobbed. I am your mother. I love you. I felt Elijah tense beside me, ready to intervene, but I squeezed his hand. I needed to do this. I stepped closer to the edge, looking down at her. You love me. I asked, my voice calm and quiet, yet amplified for everyone to hear. You loved me when you sat there and watched them humiliate me at dinner. You loved me when you let Dominique destroy my work. You loved me when you slapped me in the face last night because I refused to let my husband be disrespected. My mother flinched, her mouth opening and closing. I was just stressed, she stammered. I didn't mean it. You meant every bit of it, I said. You made your choice, Mom. For 30 years you chose her. You chose the golden child. You put her on a pedestal and treated me like the dirt beneath it. You enabled her greed. You fed her ego until it turned into a crime. I pointed to Dominique, who was now sobbing hysterically as a police officer asked her to step aside for questioning. That is your creation, Mom. That is the masterpiece you built. And now that it is falling apart, you want to run to the daughter you threw away. No, Jasmine, do not say that, my mother wailed. I am saying it, I said, my voice hardening. You picked your favorite. You placed all your bets on Dominique and Hunter. You thought they were the winners. Well, congratulations. You got exactly what you wanted. You are with them. I signaled to the security guards. Please remove these people from my wedding, I commanded. All of them. My mother's face went pale. Jasmine, you cannot kick me out. I am the mother of the bride. No, I replied, turning my back on her. You are just a woman who bet on the wrong horse. Go follow your golden child. She is going to need someone to bail her out. And it certainly will not be me. The security guards moved in with professional efficiency. 2 of them grabbed Dominique by the arms as she tried to cling to the pews. Another 2 stepped in front of my mother, blocking her path to the stage. The rest of the team escorted the police officers who were dragging a weeping Hunter toward the exit. The procession of my tormentors began to move down the center aisle, a parade of shame in reverse. The guests watched in stunned silence, some even standing up to get a better view. The sound of Dominique's heels scraping against the marble floor mixed with her incoherent screaming. It was a chaotic, ugly scene, but to me it looked like justice. "We are sisters," Jasmine, Dominique shrieked as they dragged her past the flower arrangements she had mocked earlier. "You cannot do this. Blood is thicker than water. You owe me. I let you live in my house. I gave you clothes. You owe me." They reached the massive double doors at the back of the ballroom. The guards pushed the doors open, revealing the bright, harsh daylight of the hotel driveway outside. The illusion of the perfect high society family was dragged out into the cold reality of the street. I signaled Elijah to wait, and I walked down the aisle. I walked slowly, my head held high, following them to the threshold. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see the door close on my past. When I reached the top of the grand staircase outside the ballroom, I looked down. Hunter was being shoved into the back of a police cruiser, his head ducked in shame. Dominique had been released by the guards on the sidewalk, but she was in hysterics. Her makeup was running down her face in black streaks, ruining the white dress. My mother stood beside her, looking lost and old, clutching her purse, staring up at me with a look of utter defeat. Dominique saw me standing there, framed by the golden light of the venue, looking like the queen of the castle. She ran to the bottom of the stairs, looking up at me with wild, desperate eyes. "Jasmine," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Open the door. Let us back in. You cannot leave us out here. This is the Onyx Hall. We belong in there. We are the VIPs." I looked down at her. I looked at the white dress that was now stained with dirt from where she had stumbled. I looked at the diamond necklace that wasn't hers. "You are right about one thing, Dominique," I called down to her. "The Onyx Hall is a place for people with class. It is a place for people who know the value of loyalty and respect." I paused, letting the words sink in. "You said this wedding was too fancy for me. You said I didn't belong here. But looking at you now, standing on the curb, screaming like a banshee, waiting for a lawyer you cannot afford, I think everything is exactly where it should be." I gestured to the street, to the dirty pavement, to the passing traffic. "That is your venue, Dominique. The sidewalk. It suits you. It matches your character. Cheap, dirty, and walked all over by everyone." "Jasmine, please," she sobbed, falling to her knees on the concrete. "Goodbye, Dominique," I said. I turned around, the silk of my Amsel gown swirling around my feet. I walked back toward the warm, golden light of the ballroom. Behind me, the heavy glass doors began to close. I heard one last muffled scream of my name, and then a solid, satisfying thud as the latch clicked shut. The noise of the street was cut off instantly. The screaming stopped. The chaos vanished. I was back inside, surrounded by white orchids and the soft murmur of the orchestra tuning their instruments for the resumption of the ceremony. Elijah was waiting for me at the end of the aisle. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew. He knew that I had just severed the dead weight that had been dragging me down for decades. I walked back to him, feeling lighter with every step. I had lost a sister, a brother-in-law, and a mother today. But looking at the man waiting for me and the friends cheering in the pews, I realized I hadn't lost anything at all. I had just taken out the trash. And now, finally, the real celebration could begin. The view from the penthouse terrace was different tonight. The city lights of Chicago usually looked like scattered diamonds on black velvet, cold and distant. But tonight they looked warm. They looked like a promise kept. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass railing, wrapping my cashmere shawl tighter around my shoulders to ward off the October breeze. It had been exactly 1 year since the doors of the Onyx Hall slammed shut on my past. 1 year since the wedding that started as a nightmare and ended as a coronation. So much can change in 365 days. I took a sip of herbal tea and looked down at the streets below. Somewhere down there in a concrete building far less comfortable than this one, Hunter was sitting on a cot. The legal system had moved surprisingly fast, fueled by the mountain of evidence Elijah's audit team had uncovered. Hunter was currently serving a 3 to 5 year sentence for wire fraud and embezzlement. The man who bragged about buying boats and running the city was now trading cigarettes for extra commissary time. Sterling Financial had sued him for every penny he stole, leaving him with nothing but a criminal record and a mountain of debt that would follow him for the rest of his life. And then there was Dominique. I actually saw her last week. I was driving through my old neighborhood, checking on a property Elijah was thinking of buying, and I stopped at the local grocery store. I was in the checkout line scrolling through my phone when I heard a familiar voice scanning items. It lacked the haughty arrogance I was used to. It sounded tired, broken. I looked up and there she was. Dominique was wearing a red polyester vest with a name tag that hung crookedly on her chest. Her hair, once perfectly highlighted and styled, was pulled back in a messy, frizzy bun. Her nails were bare. She was scanning a bag of frozen peas for a customer who was yelling at her about a coupon that had expired. She looked up and saw me. For a moment, time froze. I was wearing a simple coat, but it was tailored, and on my finger the wedding ring Elijah had given me. The real one caught the harsh fluorescent light of the supermarket. Dominique didn't scream. She didn't make a scene. She just looked down at the scanner, her face flushing a deep, shameful red. She mumbled the total, her hands shaking as she bagged the groceries. She had sold her house to pay off a fraction of Hunter's legal fees and was now working the very job she used to mock me for having in college. I didn't say a word. I didn't smirk. I just paid for my water, took my receipt, and walked out. Her punishment wasn't my anger anymore. Her punishment was her reality. My mother, Mama Joyce, had suffered a different kind of fate. She was living in a small studio apartment near the airport, the only place she could afford after the family reputation collapsed and her social circle abandoned her. She called me once a month. I never answered. She sent letters, long, rambling pages about how family should forgive and forget about how lonely she was. I didn't burn them. I just placed them in a box in the back of my closet unopened. I had forgiven her in my heart for my own peace. But forgiveness does not mean access. She had chosen her side, and now she had to live in the silence she created. I turned away from the balcony and walked back into the living room. The penthouse was quiet, filled with the soft jazz music Elijah loved. But it wasn't empty. On the coffee table sat the blueprints for the Jasmine Brooks Preservation Library. It was opening next month. Elijah had bought an old historic bank building downtown and gifted it to me. He didn't just give me money, he gave me a canvas. It was going to be the largest center for rare book restoration in the Midwest. I wasn't just fixing old pages anymore. I was building a legacy, a place where history would be saved, not thrown in the trash like an old suit. I heard the front door click open. Elijah walked in carrying a bag of takeout from our favorite Thai place. He had discarded his suit jacket and loosened his tie. He looked tired, but the moment he saw me, the fatigue melted from his face. "Hey, you," he smiled, setting the food on the kitchen island. "You are staring at the blueprints again. You are going to wear a hole in the paper with your eyes." I smiled and walked over to him. "I am just making sure there is enough room in the children's section." Elijah paused. He looked at me, his brow furrowing slightly. "The children's section? We didn't put a children's section in the original plan. You said rare books are too fragile for kids." I walked up to him and took his hands. I placed them gently on my stomach. The silk of my dress was soft, but underneath there was the tiniest curve that hadn't been there a few months ago. "I think we are going to need a children's section, Elijah," I whispered. "And maybe a nursery in the back office." Elijah went still. His large, strong hands trembled slightly against my skin. He looked into my eyes, searching for confirmation. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. "The doctor confirmed it this morning. You are going to be a father." Elijah let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He picked me up off the ground, spinning me around as if I weighed nothing. He buried his face in my neck, holding me so tight I could feel his heart beating against my chest. It was a beat of pure, unadulterated joy. We stood there for a long time, swaying in the middle of our kitchen, the city lights watching us from the windows. They laughed at me, I said softly into his ear. They laughed because I chose a man who wore an apron. They laughed because I chose a man who served others. They thought dignity came from a title or a bank account. Elijah set me down but didn't let go of my waist. He looked at me with that same intensity he had on the altar. Let them laugh, Jasmine. They were looking at the world through a keyhole. We kicked down the door. I rested my head on his chest. They forgot the most important rule of life, I whispered. The one thing I learned from all those dusty books I restored. You can never judge a book by its cover. A tattered jacket might hide a first edition masterpiece, and a man in a flower-stained t-shirt might be the king who builds you a castle. Elijah smiled and kissed my forehead. And a quiet girl in the corner might be the queen who rules it. He pulled back and offered me his hand, bowing slightly just like the general manager had done on our wedding day. May I have this dance, Mrs. Brooks? I took his hand. Always. As we began to dance slowly in the living room, moving to the rhythm of the city and our own heartbeats, the camera of my mind zoomed out. It pulled back from the intimate warmth of our home, through the glass windows rising higher and higher into the night sky. The penthouse became a glowing square of light in the vast tapestry of Chicago. Down below, the world was noisy and chaotic. People were chasing status, fighting for scraps, and judging each other by their clothes. But up here, in the quiet sanctuary we had built on a foundation of truth and respect, there was only peace. I had won. Not because I was rich, not because I was powerful, but because I had found the one thing money cannot buy, and poverty cannot steal. I had found real love. And that was the greatest revenge of all. The most profound lesson here is that true value often whispers while insecurity screams. Hunter and Dominique judged a book by its cover, chasing the illusion of wealth while missing the masterpiece hidden underneath. Jasmine's journey proves that blood doesn't make a family, loyalty and respect do. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is close the door on those who hurt you to protect your own peace. Real power isn't about proving others wrong. It's about living your truth so loudly that their validation no longer matters. Have you ever had to cut ties with toxic family to save yourself? Share your story in the comments below and subscribe for more.